Hi everyone, welcome to another podcast from Explore. I'm Vishal, PGD and GM student of Batch 27. Our guest today has spent more than 2 decades building and scaling practices across US, India, and Asia Pacific. Over an 18-year career at Deloitte, he has led cyber, technology, and risk portfolios as a partner across global markets. Today, he is the founder and chief revenue officer at Metavrash. He's at XLRI Jamshedpur to speak at ReinVision 5.0, the digital transformation conclave themed Human AI Synergy, reimagining leadership in the age of intelligent transformation. Let's welcome Shree Parthasarathy. Welcome, sir. How was start with something informal? How was your experience back in campus?
Experience is good. Always, I think, coming back to campus and coming back to academics, I think is very, very nice. Yeah, and I do a lot of this in terms of working with students across multiple campuses, both here in India and the US. Yeah, it's definitely enriching because I think the learning is two ways, right? I think there's a lot of innovation and new thinking in terms of the youngsters and the future leaders. So I think it's always enriching to come back and, in a way, giving back to the youngsters and also learning from them in terms of how they are thinking, what is their thought process. So it's always fantastic to be back on campus.
So we'll start with the topic.
Sure.
So you've spent over 2 decades across cyber, digital, and technology, and you've seen transformation from inside a global consulting landscape and also inside your own venture. When you look back from these vantage points, what does each one let you see that the others don't?
See, the way I would put it is, I think, from a career journey perspective. First, looking at it as a consultant, where I was helping organizations or as a trusted advisor, helping organizations transform. So, go in there, understand what they're doing, and then essentially help them transform their journey, whether it was in the risk space, the technology, or the cyber, and other spaces, right? And then to primarily sort of guide them through those entire programs and a lot of take it through. In that particular case, you're operating as a trusted advisor. And then when I went on to become what I would say the cyber leader, national cyber leader, and then in terms of South Asia, and then also the chief innovation officer, then the responsibilities change. Then your responsibilities are not only essentially looking at your clients and managing that, but you also have a lot of things in terms of the practice, the people, and other things, and how you're primarily growing. And key things there are now the dynamics have changed from purely in terms of your domain to where you also need to completely manage the business, right? From an overall perspective. So you have to synergize between the tech, the cyber or the tech or whatever the domain, and then bring the business. And there again, you still have a structure to basically play with. And then if you look at from a startup perspective, all of a sudden you level yourself down because now you're basically multi-hatting. You pretty much have to do a whole range of things. And as you grow, the company will also change in terms of various people, the roles and other things. But the way a founder works or the way a person was doing a startup venture in my particular case, I have to primarily make sure that I'm on top of everything. Whether it is finance, whether it's collections, whether it's innovation, whether it's those kind of things. So you're pretty much be multi-hatting in that kind of a role. So it's very, very different in terms of each one of the things that you do. And I think enriching in its own way, each one of those particular roles. So I think you just have to basically grow into those particular roles.
So you've been involved in bringing several cybersecurity and technology firms into a larger organization. What did you learn about which capabilities an enterprise can acquire and which it should grow on its own?
Sure. This I will segment into two kinds of companies. One is where I would look at a large enterprise. Others I would look at a smaller kind of a company. If I'm looking at a smaller company, and I know AI is the most best used term right now, everybody wants to talk AI, but let's move back a little. Let's say cloud transformation and something where companies wanted. During COVID time, everybody wanted to implement cloud, right? So from that aspect, when you look at a smaller company, it was essentially very important for them to embark on the cloud journey, right, from that aspect. So from a pure technology perspective. And same way, if you take larger companies, whether the banks and all things, they also wanted to embark. But what happens as companies grow, right? And let's say you have a large company. The companies start with a particular vision and a particular goal, yeah, and what they want to do. But as they grow, they build a various number of functions like HR, then you have procurement, you have everything, a range of departments that you're doing. But your core business may be something. Let's say you are a fintech company, your core business is some part of it. But now what has happened is like just like what I'm doing, you have a startup, you have multiple companies and multiple departments, and as you grow, the first thing that companies have to look at is it's not just about acquisition, but look at whether some of these particular functions can be outsourced, can be done better and more efficiently, so that you can focus on the core business. For one of the largest telecom providers, what we primarily did is other than their customer function, other than their product and those areas, we pretty much helped them outsource everything else. Yeah, even their IT and everything was outsourced because that was not their core business. Now, when you look at it, what were they doing? They were saying, "Hey, I'm going to manage expectations through these outsource partners or business partners, and work on that." Now, let's go back to the core. When you go back to the core, as a company grows larger, a company's soul tends to become old. What do I mean by that is, when you are young, your agility, your innovation, your ability to do things are much faster. But as you grow older, there's a resistance to change, and there's also innovation is not as fast as you wanted it. So now what you need to do is, if I want to basically keep my core young, my soul young, then that's where you need to go and look at what are my adjacencies that I need to acquire, which are going to complement my core. So for example, if I take a company, again, going back to fintech, right? Let's say they started about 10, 15 years ago. Now in this era of AI, if they want to do a lot more things on them, so they can potentially go and acquire a company, rather than doing everything organic within, they can go outside, pick up a company which is already very agile and doing certain things and bringing it in. But when you do that, your guiding principles of how you're bringing them in is going to be very important as to what is it that you're looking at acquiring that particular company. So that is where I think the soul of the company always has to be very young, and that is something that is part of your core that you need to maintain. For classic example is, today if Apple stopped innovating, would you continue to buy their product? You would not, right? So they always need to be on leading edge. It's not that Apple does everything only internally. They also go acquire companies and all that. So that is where I think, as companies which want to always be on the leading edge will continue to do that. There will be internal innovation, which is organic, but then they will also go outside to acquire other products to complement.
So always look for synergies when you're acquiring to complement your core. That's what.
Absolutely. And I think that has to have the multiplier effect that you're looking at. So you're saying, I'm going to launch something new, right? So for example, going back to the smartphone thing, you have Samsung, which has the Fold and all of those things, right? And then you have Apple. I think Apple, if I look at from the point of Series 8 to now, I've not seen that much of an innovation in terms of the product change. It's been pretty standard, right? But when Steve Jobs was there, their innovation was very different, right? His thought process and thinking was very different. Not even the current leaders are very, very innovative when you look at it from an Apple perspective. But what I'm saying is, the rate of innovation or the rate of change that they've implemented is not as significant compared to
So, for the last 2 decades, what's the one thing that you would say the enterprise technology has stayed stubbornly fixed on?
See, technologies will come, technologies will continue to evolve. I think one of the things is, what is the stage do companies want to jump into it? There are companies who are waiting and watching to see how AI is going to work. There are companies which are already doing certain things from an AI perspective. And if I look at it, look backwards. I think if you take India, we say digital India, but I think more than 60 to 70% of Indian companies are just breaking the barrier on IT, not even digital transformation, right? We are talking about that they're implementing IT and those kind of things, and so their current uh, maturity when it comes to IT is very limited. So from that aspect, these companies have an opportunity to jump into AI directly from that aspect, right? Because they miss the digital transformation. So now, where what happens is, whenever new technologies come, you've had technologies. For example, you've had the internet, right? You have had the Wi-Fi. You had then you have the cloud. Each one of these are basically then under cloud. You have a variety of different things like infrastructure as a service, software as a service. All of those have basically changed, right? And AI at a point in time when it happened, I would say back in the 1990s, AI was there, was a concept even then. But at that point, it was not mature enough to primarily hit the ground from a acceptance perspective or consumable perspective. Now it's come to a particular stage. So I think what will happen is the common thread that I see is technologies will continue to come and change. Organizations will need to basically pick it up, embrace it, and which is where I think there will always be the early adopters, and there will be the people who will wait and watch to see what others are doing, what are the success and failures, learn from that, and basically do that. And that is going to be the common thread.
So there's a well-known statistics that most digital transformation under-deliver on their business case. Like from where you sat, what actually separates the projects that work and the projects that stop?
So if you take a typical digital transformation initiative, what makes it successful is, I would say, tone at the top, perseverance, a clear vision and strategy as to what you want to achieve from an outcome perspective. And when you looked at the earlier panel that we were talking about, they were talking about outcomes, right? So what is it that you really want to achieve? And putting the right what you call structure in place. And if you do not have the internal teams to primarily do it, then bring in the external experts to primarily guide you, but then also build the core expertise within to continue to basically drive the journey. Because I think otherwise what happens is the moment the consultant leaves, you do not have the sustainable expertise within to sustain that kind of a transformation. The other area that where digital transformation succeeds or fails is, I would say, effective change and communication management. Because I can implement a fantastic, what I would call as a digital system, SAP system, and all things. But after that, when the CEO asks for a report, I still download everything, put it in Excel, and take it and give it to him. So then what happens is I'm failing, right? If you really want to do that kind of a workflow management, you need to do that. Same way now, if you look at AI and you're looking at adoption, I think organizations need to really look at what is it that they want to achieve. There are organizations which are going to be AI native. There are organizations which are existing and which want to adopt AI. And when you think of from an AI perspective and transformation, it is not about just plug and play. It's now you have to rethink your business. If you do not rethink your business and just plug it wherever you think it is going to be, the effectiveness and the return on investment from an AI perspective is not going to be that effective. That's where the entire business transformation, the process transformation, and how you're going to think your entire business and how you're going to future-proof it for the next 20 years is going to be important. So any transformation journey, you have to look at it from that longer-term vision. And there has to be the continuous drive and sponsorship from the leadership so that it can basically sustain the growth. Because any of them take a lot of time to be implemented and to mature and settle down.
And on this business scale, standardization was supposed to deliver consistently across geographies. You had experience working in multiple geographies. So in practice, how much local adaptation did you have to do? before like standardization stopped working?
See, most large implementations, I wouldn't call it just standardization. I think it's a standardization, localization, and all that. So you can have what you call as standard frameworks. So, for example, if I'm implementing a global digital transformation, and let's say I'm in 20 plus countries, yeah, and what I'm doing is now I'm going to roll that out. So what I do is primarily first is to look at all of those particular locations which are my representative sample. First select that and see whether I can create a common framework for the entire company based on this representative sample, which is what I'm then starting to standardize. Then you're saying standardize, automate, replicate, and how are you basically rolling it out to everybody. But even with all of that, what is going to happen is about 80 to 90% is going to be what you call as a standardized that you can basically roll out, and then you have a certain level of local customization. What do I mean by that? That means I can't basically standardize. I can have a standard tax module. Let's say I've wanted to roll it out from Netherlands. That's my headquarters, right? I had a standard tax module, but then when I roll it to my different geographies, my tax module has to be able to adapt to the local. Yeah, that means, for example, if I'm implementing it in India, then my APIs and other things should be able to connect to the local system, the local laws. It has to basically do that. So that is where I think it's a combination of standardization, which helps you accelerate, and then also change the pace, and also from a longer term perspective, when you're looking to maintain and manage, it becomes that much more effective. And then you have the localization that you do, which are specific to the in-country businesses or in geography wherever you're operating, so that you can sort of have a global system which also supports your local business requirement.
So the last decade of transformation had recognizable architecture, center of excellences, global delivery hubs, standardization at scale. You built a lot of that. So how much of it do you think carries forward to the next decade?
I would say it will continue to operate that way. The only thing that will start changing, I think AI, if you look at it, is a big disruptor. For example, if you take the global software factories which were residing here in India, I think what is now going to happen with significantly from an AI perspective is, while a lot of work will continue to get done here, but I think with automation and AI, a lot of things will move back to the mothership. Yeah, that is going to happen. There are going traditional jobs which possibly were there in what I would call as the global captive centers or the global capability centers and all things. Those essentially will also have to change. What was traditionally brought in from global and made done offshore, now essentially some of it will start going back because of technology, because of AI, and because of the way organizations are rethinking that, right? So it's something like if you went before the IT era and you had the entire outsourcing of manufacturing, right? Now, what happened is, if you take countries like the US, they outsource significantly, and where they outsource to China and all of this. And that was the era of globalization. Now, what is happening is countries are starting to look inward. Yeah, it is more of nationalism, and that is what's happening. So they're trying to see, how do I bring it back internally. So there are going to be what you call as, similar to what I said previously, you have to choose what you outsource and what you keep in-house, which is going to be important. That is where organizations are going to start rethinking that entire framework and saying, hey, what do I still keep in India, Philippines, or Colombia or other places, and what do I bring back internally from overall management? Because now I don't have that much of a dependency from a people perspective, so I can possibly do it even in a local geography where I may have a constraint on the human capital, right? So that's the balance. So that is how it's going to change from an overall center. But the thought process and the structuring will still not change, because there are still variations in terms of cost. You look at cost, you look at efficiency, you look at a lot of those particular aspects, and also you have to look at how fast AI is going to mature, and how, from a stabilization perspective and consumerization perspective of AI, how is it going to. For example, if I put everything in AI, and all of a sudden there's so much of a requirement of power, and most countries in the world have a power deficit. How am I going to run the data center, right? So I think organizations will be striking a balance between that, and that's where the global capability centers are going to be very important. But at the same time, they will have to transform as to what they do and what they don't, which will possibly change from the past.
On the same line that you said that technology started going back, this recent case of US where they stopped Anthropic from releasing a certain AI model. What's your thoughts on that? With technology getting locked into a particular country.
That has always been there. If you take some of the encryption algorithms that have been there, I think there has not been access provided to those encryption algorithms across the entire world. And then there are sanctioned countries and other things where those softwares don't basically flow, right? If you go back to the fundamental of why that was basically stopped, primarily what happened is that could pretty much disrupt a lot of the national government systems and different very critical systems, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why it got stopped. And at the same time, it was also an advantage that the US possibly felt that they need to control from an overall perspective. Yes, there will always be what you call as those kind of controls and what they basically place, and it is not going to be always a free flow that basically happens, because that is a differentiator for that particular country. So it doesn't matter whether it's the US or India or China or anybody, right? If they do feel that there is something that is going to be so strategically important for them and differentiate them in the world, then they are going to possibly protect that in a particular way, right? Only thing is you're looking at digital assets. Same way you're looking at minerals, you're looking at other things, assets and other things. So you have to think of it in that particular way. It is, as I said, you are going back to nationalism. You are going back to protectionism, right?
Yeah.
So from that aspect, you will look at your national interest, and I think every country has a right to do that, and there's no difference, and that is going to be the way the world basically continues to move forward. And I think gone is that particular era as where people said the world is flat. The world is still flat, but essentially there are still a lot of borders and boundaries which are going to have those particular restrictions, and you will start seeing more and more of those restrictions as we move forward.
So digital transformation was largely about digitizing existing processes. AI is starting to rewrite the processes themselves. So where are you seeing the distinction becoming real, and how should organizations be thinking of that change?
See, an organization with the digital transformation in the right way would have also rethought a lot of their particular businesses, business processes, their workflows, and all that. Organizations which did not do it right uh, would have possibly picked up a product and primarily said, "Hey, I'm going to now rework some of my processes and other things to adapt to how that particular product does it and all that." So I think the way to basically think in this entire journey is whether it is IT, whether it is digital transformation, whether it's AI, organizations have to have thought how it is going to change, right? If I go back to a completely offline business that was there prior to the dating of IT, and when they suddenly came into IT, right? Let's give an example of telecom, right? Uh, Way back, everything was landlines, yeah, everything. And now companies like BSNL and other thing had to rethink and do things differently, right? Now they were moving into a different area. Now think of Kodak, which was the most popular thing where it was basically making those reels, film and other thing. Then it had to rethink itself in terms of digital, right? So moving from films, and essentially what was their supply chain? They had all of these particular distribution centers and everything where they were having the photo studios and reels and everything, and then the processing and what was happening, and then they were selling paper and everything, right? Now all of a sudden the company had to rethink the entire aspect. They had to rethink the entire journey of, if they needed to stay relevant, they need to rethink all of that. So I think every time a new technology comes, organizations have an opportunity to rethink and rewire their entire the processes. It's a question of how much change is the organization willing to embrace, and for them to stay relevant, what are the things that they need to do? So I wouldn't say it is just from an AI perspective. Yes, AI is a significant disruptor, but at the same time, the same philosophy and thought process they should have applied across multiple areas, across multiple technologies.
So on the same line of thought, a lot of digital transformation programs are now being positioned as AI transformation programs. Like, how would you categorize this genuine capability shift from a changing vocabulary?
If you go and ask let's not even go into AI, right? Today, you go and ask any organization, okay, let's go back a little. BYOD, you know what BYOD,
Yeah.
right? Bring your own this thing device, right? When it started off, the common thought process and philosophy was bring your own disaster, right? Because people were very reluctant to allow these particular mobile devices into the environment, right? But essentially, after a point in time, they had to let it in, and they had to figure out how to basically control it. Same way and at a point in time when you went and asked those particular companies, are you using mobile? Everybody would say yes. You have a row of CIOs, CISOs, and company executives right now, and you ask them, are you doing AI? Everybody will say, I'm doing AI.
Yes.
Why? Because there's a FOMO principle where they essentially feel that if they don't do that, either they're going to be looked at as laggards or essentially not aligned with the latest trends and innovation. Whether they're actually doing it or not, they would basically raise their hand. Same way, organization, as I said before, people say, oh, I'm doing digital transformation. But I'll say you that they're doing basic IT implementation. And they package it, and I think it is us consultants who I have to blame, because we put very nice coin terms where people want to say that I'm doing that, right, from a digital transformation. Nobody wants to say I'm doing IT transformation anymore. They want to say I'm doing digital transformation, even if they're implementing basic IT systems. Now, if you go and ask people, are you doing digital transformation? They say, no, I'm doing AI transformation, right? Next, there's going to be other things that come in. When quantum comes in, there are going to be a lot of other things that basically happen. And everybody is going to say, oh, I'm quantum ready, and all things, even if they're not, right? So I think it is sort of the herd mentality, and also an aspect of where they don't want to feel left out, or they don't want to be singled out in terms of saying that I'm the only one who's not doing it, even if they're not doing it.
So you build businesses around digital trust. So as AI systems make more consequential decisions, what does trust need to evolve to than it was 5 to 10 years before?
The question is, how do you define trust? Right? I think that is going to be important. And let me take an example in this particular aspect. Let's say you were traveling somewhere, okay, and it was a new country, and you were traveling there, and people said, hey, you go there, you have Google Translate, Google Maps, and all thing, and all of the other tools, digital tools that you have, you can pretty much manage. Okay. Now let's say in this particular aspect, I'll give you a fundamental. Let's say your internet fails. Okay. Now you can't use any of those apps. Yeah. So what is the trust that you have there? That is what the resilience factor of the connection. Now let's go back down to the app. What has happened is you are now trusting these apps to basically guide you. Now you don't know the directions or nothing, and this happened to me in South Africa when I was there. On a day when I had planned everything, I was perfectly set to go to the airport. The internet stopped, right? And it was a sort of almost like a local blackout. So I did not know what needs to be done. So from a Google Maps perspective, Google Maps didn't work. When I went and looked and talked to people, I talked to them. They primarily said, "You crazy? Look at map." And nobody even knows anyway. They've lost that particular ability. Third is essentially, and what I'm doing then is trying to figure out navigating and all things in the. Now, what I look at is in that particular case, I place my trust on Google Maps to be available to me. Yeah. And I place my trust on the internet connection to be there from an overall perspective. And it did not happen. Or let's say another example here. Let's say you order Uber. You have to go for an interview. You are in Gurgaon and you need to go for an interview by 12:30. You did a pre-booking rental of Uber. You did all of those particular things, and then everything was fine. Right? What happened at the last minute? Uber cancelled. Yeah. This happens to you multiple times. You lose. What happens next time? You're saying, "Forget Uber. I'm going to do something else." And there's nothing against Uber, right? I'm just giving them as an example. They provide great service, no issues at all. Where I am coming at is I'm just giving it as an example. So you would possibly go to a competitor, or you would primarily look at alternates and other things. That is where it is. So the first and foremost is when you look at trust. Trust is about a promise to deliver a service. However, when the service was required and you promised it, you did not deliver it. That is the first part of trust. Second is whatever you promised from a quality perspective, the same cab came in and it was very dirty, right? Again, you're breaking the trust of the customer. Third is primarily from a payment perspective. You basically told the person that I'm going to charge so much, but you had an extra fee or whatever it is. From a transparency perspective, you did not have. Fourth is that you are looking at that when you did your transaction, the transaction was not secure. So you have an aspect of security. Fifth is you are looking at your information then was shared with somebody else. You're looking at a breach of privacy. Sixth, the service was, although you were trying to click, the service was not available, right? So the aspect of resiliency. So when you look at trust, there are a multiple set of factors that form what you call as trust. It is not just security. Most common people associate trust with security and privacy. It's not. I think it's a range of things which ultimately delivers the experience to the entire customer. So if I'm a business which is not using any digital, yeah, and I'm delivering a service to you, I can still have your trust. Yeah. In that particular case, there's no security, there's no privacy. All of these things are out of play, right? So, which is where I think people have to think about trust in a very, very different format, which has a range of parameters which build that particular trust with that organization.
So, you said AI won't replace leaders, but leaders who leverage AI will replace those who don't.
Absolutely. In the panel today, there was a discussion where I think somebody asked about, we are now using AI to generate emails and all things, right? Okay. I think we've been using AI or forms of AI or forms of automation and all things for a range of time. All of you are digital netizens, right? All of you have grown up with computers, right? None of you have basically written everything on paper and primarily this one, unless it is your written exam and all things where you've written. Most of the things that you do, you type it and all things. So you have autocorrect, you have word correction, you have Grammarly, you have a range of tools that are there. And even if you, before the times of Grammarly and all things, even Word had the dictionary and synonyms and all things like that, grammar correction and all things, right? So it always there, you were assisted from that part of it. Yeah. Now you have more advanced tools which also suggest, this phrase, what you call the tone of your voice, tone of this thing, the language can be softened and all thing. And now you have AI, which primarily you're saying, hey, this is my structure, and I'm feeding it to AI, and it is giving me a format. What I mean by people should be outsourcing some of the tasks, but they should not be outsourcing the thinking. That is where I'm coming at. And what I mean by that is, if you want AI to write all of it, then I would say is where you're outsourcing your thinking. But if you're giving it a structure and saying, assist me as a tool to help calibrate this, and then once it gives me that particular version, I'm going through multiple iterations finally before, because the context, AI is not going to know the context. You're writing it to somebody who's your boss, and you know lots of pieces of information, right? And you have not fed all those pieces of information to AI. And so you just take that and basically dump it into an email and send it across. It's not going to work. And which is where I say that when you look at AI, what is going to be very, very important is, in many terms, I say tools are made for fools, right? But however, if those people use the tools in the right way, then they are not fools anymore. It's more of, now you're saying, I have a tool which is assisting me and which I'm basically working with, and it's sort of a companion to me to help me, right? And I'm not stopping thinking. And why I say that is, if stopping thinking is, what happens if you do not use an organ? What happens? It becomes vestigial, right? Yeah. So same way, if you don't use a brain, what happens? It becomes you're no longer, and it is true, right? If you're not rewiring your brain, if you're not thinking about it and all things, then what is going to happen is your brain is not going to be able to connect the dots. Vocabulary. If you don't have vocabulary, what are you going to suggest to AI? You don't have that. Okay? It doesn't know what is the context that you're trying to say. Same way, if I'm saying I'm playing the game of Sudoku, right? And on one side, I have where I'm doing it all by myself. Other is, whenever I have a challenge, it gives me a clue, and I'm using it, right? So what happens is, I'm not racking my brain enough to think. What I'm doing is, I'm using an assistant which is a crutch to do that, which is where going forward, as you look at business leaders, they should not use AI as a crutch. They have to use AI as an assistant. AI to help in terms of their productivity, AI to basically accelerate things, but the thinking and the foundation of that particular thought has to come from them. And that is why it's called AI, and it's not intelligence, it's AI, right? So that is the complement between human intelligence and AI, and when they come together, it's a power combination. I'm not saying don't use AI, I'm saying use AI, but use it as a power combination to make yourself differentiated compared to your competition.
Just so to say, use AI as a tool and don't outsource your own thinking.
Absolutely.
That was so insightful, sir. So, like in a typical leader's perspective, what would a day look like if he's using AI efficiently?
What would have possibly taken me maybe a half an hour to write an email to, let's say, a CEO of my company, possibly now, once I know the thought process and the structure, would take me less than a few minutes. Yeah. So what have I done? I've crunched things, right? That's what I've done, crash it. Same way now, if I look at it from a software perspective, what possibly took 10 programmers 6 months to primarily do can possibly be done in a week. Yeah. So you're differentiating yourself, you're accelerating competition wise, right? You're sort of creating a new kind of a wave in that particular area. So, which is where I would say, when you think about it, what is going to happen, and all of us are doing it. We are using a range of assistants, which are social media assistants and all of that. We are doing that. It's a question of, as I said before, balance it out and use these particular tools to make sure that your job gets done easier, faster, and more efficient. Yeah, that's where it is. Go back to the era when digital was not that significant, right? What would people do? People would basically scan something, then they would fax it and other things.
Yeah.
Now, and previously people used to write letters and they would post it, and they would hope that the letter basically reaches the other person. Here, what happens? It happens in an instant. So I'm not telling you to go back to that particular era of going back and doing a manual post. I'm saying use it, use technology, but use technology to your advantage, and that is where what I would say is modern and more efficient leaders are going to be, where they are going to continue that particular journey and transformation, but they are going to be more effective, and which is where An organization which possibly required 100 people can possibly now do it with 20 people. And these are some hypothetical examples, but each model has to be examined to see how what fits and what's the right fit and what's not.
So you framed it as intelligence becoming abundant while judgment remains human.
Yes.
So judgment usually gets built by making decisions with incomplete information and having to live with it. So if AI handles most of the routine repetitions, where do you think the next generation can build judgment from?
Have you heard the term of garbage in, garbage out?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can outsource your thinking the way you're talking about. You can outsource your thinking to AI to do certain tasks from that aspect. But the problem is, if you did not feed it properly, if you did not structure it properly, then what happens is the output is wrong. What you had as a traditional mindset, let's talk about audits, right? What happens in an audit? A person who's at the lower level collects information, compiles it, then the next person reviews it, and multiple people review it, and then you have a domain expert or a senior person reviewing it and doing the quality review, and then there's an independent quality review and all that thing. So why are we forgetting all these traditional principles, right? That's where it is. You need to have the same set of guardrails that you're putting on the same thing. So what now all of a sudden what's happening is you're thinking that AI is doing it, so AI has replaced this particular layer. All of a sudden you're thinking I can take this information and give it to my end customer. No.
Okay.
You need to primarily think about having the same checks and balances in terms of how you're balancing it out. And always when you look at tools and when you look at it, there are going to be anomalies, there are going to be false positives. You have to look at all of that. You have to then think about how do you sift through that and make sense out of it and be able to challenge it. Today, if you go and put a prompt in ChatGPT, I will guarantee you, after you put that prompt and gives you a response, it will say, you are thinking in the right direction. Yes? It gives you that sense of gratification that, oh, all of a sudden I am thinking in the right direction. But if you knew how to challenge it, you would see that there are some flaws. Then you would say, no, this is not the way to think. You need to possibly look at it in a different perspective. It'll come back. It'll come back with response. Same way, what would happen is if you had an analyst, human analyst, who's primarily looking at a balance sheet, come and showed it to you. You say, no, this is not the way to look at it. But you say, no, this is wrong. This is not, and you send him back. Right? Same way, you would send AI back and say, do it in a different way. I don't think what you're doing is correct. And then you also have to be able to connect the dots between your data and all of those particular things so that you know stringent. For example, it was giving you something in year 2026, but you knew that you took a particular allowance in 2025. Yeah. And that should have been brought forward, but AI didn't bring it. But where does your thinking go from that aspect? So that is where your intelligence comes in from how you look at it. And that part of it should not change. Yes, AI will become more and more intelligent, can do a lot more. And once you train it and get structured, but at the same time, I think, as I said before, it has to be a complement between human and AI. And that is when it will be where we.
So in the age of AI, asking questions becomes the most important thing. Asking questions, validating, like repeating the question, validating whether the answer is correct. That becomes one of the guardrails that govern our.
I look at it that first and foremost is if I give you a accounting problem, if you don't know accounts, and you go and ask AI, how are you going to ask it the right questions?
Yeah.
Right? So the fundamentals are that you can't suddenly, because of AI, become an accounting expert. You can't become a medical expert these days. This is what happens, right? I think yesterday when we were having the conversation, one of the other panelists was talking about where he said, from a medical perspective, right? All of a sudden, everybody is a Google doctor. Everybody knows how to read a report. Everybody knows how to do that. And so suddenly what is happening is you are thinking that AI can replace the doctor. Yeah. And you're also, not that I have not done it, I have also done it. So everybody goes and challenges the doctor as to what is this? Why are you saying, right? But I think That is where the intelligence comes in. Intelligence, the experience, all of those particular things. And some of those particular doctors have spent years together studying all of that. And their experience doesn't come just from books. Their experience comes from looking at people, looking at the symptoms. So, for example, what works for somebody here in India would not possibly work for somebody in Europe because the genetics are different, right? But when we look at it from an AI perspective, we said, oh, this is my prescription, feed it. You didn't basically tell it what it is, what was your medical history, what was the previous, what was your other condition that you have, pre-conditions and all things. You just fed the report. But a doctor is trained to ask you all of that particular questions, and you don't have the expertise to ask all of those questions. So, which is where I think it's not about asking a question; it's also making sure you have that particular domain expertise or knowledge to ask the right question. Otherwise, what happens is whatever AI gives you is going to be gospel truth.
Yeah.
But I look at it. Yeah.
So, you worked with governments, academia, and startup ecosystems across cyber, fintech, and medical and defense. Where do you see India's most durable advantage as AI reshapes these industries?
I think India needs to use AI to sort of upskill our entire population. I think a lot of our population essentially is below par when it comes to education. I think we have what you call responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, and accountability as to make sure these particular people come up to. Why am I saying that? And it's not that everybody has to become an intelligent worker. There are vocational workers, there are intelligent workers, there are a range of things. And India as a country is so diverse and so different. So we need to ensure that we are able to provide. So when you take academia needs to make sure education is easily available. One of the big things that I feel AI can do is crash what you call as academic costs and bring it down so that education is easily available to more and more people, right? Today, whether you take schools or whether you take institutions, educational institutions, higher education institutions, while they believe that they started with philanthropy and all things, but essentially it's a money-making mission, right? So I think we need to democratize knowledge and bring it down to the lowest level. And I think we need to tap the human potential. And what we need to do is train, if we can train all of our particular citizens to say human and AI and do the power combination, then I think we are created what you call, if we have 1.4 billion people, we have now created 1.4 billion times 10x potential. Yeah. And I think that is where it is. And that this will not happen just with academia alone. It has to be a public-private partnership. I'm already seeing this with the larger companies where they are democratizing the knowledge learning, AI learning and all things, which is good. But I think we need to bring it down to even the basics where everybody is taught. And I think that should be the dream and vision of the country, to sort of upgrade all of its citizens to that particular level.
So, for an MBA student entering the workforce now, what capabilities would you tell them to build deliberately over the next 5 years, knowing what you know about the industry growth?
Domain knowledge, knowledge of technology and AI, and don't forget critical thinking, analytical thinking, and what I would call a soft skills, interpersonal. Those are going to be important. Why is that important? Because I think AI without a domain is going to be, for example, somebody comes and says, I want to do analytics. Then my question is, what kind of analytics would you want to do? They say, I want to do business analytics. Okay, what kind of business analytics? You want to do manufacturing? You want to do fintech? You want to do healthcare? What kind of business analytics you want to do? So if you want to do business analytics, and let's say you say healthcare, do you really understand healthcare? For me to have you do business analytics in healthcare, you should understand healthcare, right? At least you should understand the fundamentals. I can't basically start you from ground zero. You have to have a particular minimal. So that one. That is the domain knowledge. Second is knowledge of these it's not just about the tools, as I think one of the panelists mentioned. It's not about tools. It is thinking about. So let's say I take people and all of a sudden I take the 118 batch, right? Take you out of your comfort zone and throw you somewhere in middle of Jharkhand, in one of the forests of Jharkhand, right? We are in Jharkhand, right? Yeah, in Jharkhand. And now I say, no mobile phone, nothing. You don't have anything. Now trace your way back to the campus. Yeah. What are you going to do? Now, what is the solution? What is the end goal that you have? The end goal that was given to you is from here, I have to reach my end state. How do I figure it? Now I don't have ATM, I don't have anything, I don't have cash in my pocket. How am I going to basically this thing? Have you seen some of the serials called Survivor?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. Right? Now you're given some very minimal things. They possibly have given you a hand compass. They've given you a few other things, right? It's not that they didn't give you anything, they gave you. Now you have to figure it out. So now you have to start thinking. But you know what your end goal, you know what could be some of the possibilities and things that you primarily do, and then you have to get to that end state. So in that particular end state, when you are getting there, now you're going to think out of the box. What do I have? I have nature around me. What can I do, right? I don't have food. Is there any food in the forest? Can I basically eat? You're going to think. Same way, when you're coming into the business world, think about critical thinking, think about solutioning, think about what is the end state that you want to achieve. Don't jump in to say, oh, I will start with this tool. That's not the way to look at it. Look at what it is and then see what is it that I need to be basically use. For example, if a doctor is going into heart surgery, right? He has 400 instruments here, right? But he knows if I'm going to do a heart surgery or if I'm going to do something which I have to basically do a microsurgery, he knows what I need to do. So then he asks for that particular tool, right? Same way, you guys have to be experts in that particular area so that you know what tool needs to be applied to achieve that particular goal.
Yes.
If you go and start with the wrong tool in the first place, then what is going to happen is then you're going to say, doesn't work. In some cases, there may not be a tool. You have to do it yourself. That means you have to manually do it, which is what it is. So you know, I need to get from a solutioning perspective from point A to point B. What are the things that are available, resources available to me, and what do I primarily do? And that is where I say, thinking like survivors and thinking about it as to what is it that is available to me and how do I manage. And availability doesn't mean what is there within the enterprise. Something may be available outside, but you may go back to your CTO and say, hey, I need this particular tool. See, a CTO will say, I don't have a budget for that. Then what are you going to do, right? Then you have to think of alternatives. So that is what it is about, achieving that particular end goal and the solutioning, which is going to be most important.
I think that it brings the closure to our session, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your experience, telling how the industry is, telling how we should be prepared for it. Thank you so much for sharing all those.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and wishing you the very best as you continue your particular journey. As I said, think out of the box and look at how you can disrupt the world and not let the world disrupt you.
I think we would take that quote for the day. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.